Hi everybody, nice to see you. Welcome to session number 8. It will be a delicate session today on tech ideologies. Fits very well because last time you were talking about AI and sustainability and the way AI is scraping all the resources on Earth and adding to the issue of climate change and even social inequality and social dimensions of sustainability. Today I will try to steer our lecture more in the direction of politics, or of what is currently going on in terms of politics. Next week we will have a session on AI and the state. That will kind of be the final lecture in this block. But today we will kind of pave the way there by talking about what I term tech ideologies. This is a summary term for or summarizing or combining different ideological phenomena that we can witness nowadays and have been able to witness for decades. And I will go through them one by one here in this lecture today at quite some length. But to give you the framework and to give you the point to which I will eventually get back at the end of this lecture, but also next week, let's start with what's going on right now out there. In the US, an ultra-right president was elected who does not refrain from celebrating himself using AI-generated images on the internet. The richest man on earth is also part of the game, kind of in the front row. He is smashing the whole state apparatus, administrative apparatus, getting data from all the institutions, discontinuing the work contracts of state workers or administrative workers to use AI instead. This here, Peter Thiel, he is also involved, although much further in the background. He is actually a person who has been holding fascist ideologies for more than 20 years. And he managed to place a direct link in the White House in the form of J.D. Vance, who is kind of the Silicon Valley ideology figure in the White House. Yeah, this is kind of the situation, and you all know about this from the news and so on, but if you look a little bit behind this, it is not a phenomenon emerging only in the last months or maybe few years, but it is a phenomenon that has a history. And this history is also an intellectual history, or if you will, an ideological history. And I will go through that in 4 stages here in that lecture. And in these 4 stages, I try to discuss to you the mindsets or the philosophical worldviews or ideologies that have been driving some parts of the AI movement, both in business and in research, also in funding and finance and in politics, because there are certain philosophical worldviews that have been driving some people in that movement for at least since the middle of the 20th century. And I think maybe the first thing to mention here is what's called transhumanism. Transhumanism is actually an old, well, comparatively old thing that's been around already since the mid-20th century. It is a philosophical worldview, if you want to call it a metaphysics or whatever, that figures technological innovation as something that, like as a force that will bring humanity on a post-biological state. So that will help humanity to overcome their biological limits, for instance, by curing all diseases or making us immortal. These will be parts of the visions of transhumanism. Transhumanism is not confined to AI, although AI has been the hot topic in these movements for the last decades. It is also looking a lot at gene technology or nano engineering and so on. So this is actually an ideology that has a very positive outlook on technological innovation as a driver of, if you will, evolution. The concept was popularized by this cuddly guy here. It's Julian Huxley, a biologist, a British biologist. He was actually, he was using that term in an essay of 1957. I will also quote from that essay in a minute. And it's important to keep in mind that this guy, this biologist, this evolutionary biologist, was also the first president of the UNESCO and has been the president of the British Eugenics Society for a couple of years. That it will also be relevant. In this essay of 1957, he writes something like, "Up till now, human life has generally been, as Hobbes," you remember Hobbes, described it, "nasty, brutish, and short. The great majority of human beings, if they have not already died young, have been afflicted with misery in one form or another, poverty, disease, ill health, overwork, cruelty, or oppression." Wow, that sounds like a leftist manifesto, but it continues some page later. "The human species as a whole, if it wishes, can transcend itself, not just sporadically as an individual here in one way, an individual there in another way, but in its entirety as humanity. We need a name for this new belief. Perhaps transhumanism will serve. Man remaining man, but transcending himself by realizing new possibilities of and for his human nature." This is the transhumanist vision of transcending the biological limits. And you see that it is not only the biological limits. In this reference to Hobbes, you already see that this is also a political vision, because Hobbes, as you remember, was this theoretician of the state power, of sovereign power, of a contract that people enter into to avoid the state of nature, the brutish state of nature, where everybody struggles against everybody. And this is fully in the realm of a political vision. And this is also something that he seeks, or he thinks, by means of technology, humanity as a whole is able to overcome. Transhumanism has been organized or has been pushed a lot in the recent years by Nick Bostrom from Oxford University. He was on this slide here on the right. So it is a philosopher affiliated, a Swedish philosopher affiliated with Oxford, and he is maybe the kind of contemporary figurehead of transhumanism. And he also co-founded the World Transhumanist Association in 1998 together with peers, and that was later renamed Humanity Plus. And this is one of the many think tanks and philanthropic organizations that you will be hearing today that are heavily co-funded or funded from people in Silicon Valley. For instance, this association is funded, among others, has been funded by Elon Musk and Peter Thiel. Transhumanism is actually deep in the mainstream since this guy here, Ray Kurzweil, he published this book, The Singularity is Near, and then later The Singularity is Nearer, because it didn't arrive, but it's a little bit nearer now. And also we can cash out a little bit more from this kind of title. So let's go for a second volume. The ideas of transhumanism, philosophical as they might be in nature, or more clandestine ideology, think tankish, they arrived and spread in the mainstream through this notion of singularity in the early 2000s, because this is a book that was widely read even among lay people, for instance also in Germany. And the singularity is nothing else but this vision that there will be a point in time where we as humans, the question is who actually, but this is the question that's not being raised. So we, TM, as humans, will reach a point where our biology changes or gets transcended, and also our social laws, like the laws of social interaction of society, will change in such a way that we cannot even judge them from nowadays, or like that we don't have any reasonable way of foreseeing what will happen or how these laws will be working after this singularity. Yeah, it's a physical metaphor from relativity theory, where singularities are points on a space-time manifolds where the space-time curvature gets infinite because you divide by 0, so that the space-time curvature does not have a defined value at this point on the manifold, so that the laws of physics will not hold there, but even not in the proximity. Like around this, there's this event horizon, you know that from black holes maybe, beyond which you do not get any information and the laws might change and so on. This is a metaphor, a physical metaphor that was spread by this guy here. Here, although neither utopian nor dystopian, the epoch will transform the concepts that we rely on to give meaning to our lives, from our business models to the cycle of human life, including death itself. Another figure or another kind of tropy that's been popularized by transhumanism is the idea of an intelligence explosion. That is also actually fairly old, already from the, I think, first wave of AI, first AI summer. You had this idea that there will be recursively improving AI agents. Yeah, that once you develop an AGI, an artificial general intelligence, you can trigger a loop in which these systems improve themselves to make them even more intelligent, and then the human is out of that loop of improvement, or like the humans will not be necessarily need the human engineering arts are not needed anymore because the AGI will self-improve, and that will lead to an excess of intelligence, so that the whole universe will spread with intelligence and there is an intelligent explosion. I'm trying to get cynical. The thing is that this is really connected to the belief that we will also spread into the cosmos, because transcending our biological limits also means transcending our kind of earthly bounds. And there are people, there will be a slide on that later, that calculated that there will be 10 to the 38 human lives, so digitalized human lives, in the Virgo supercluster. Yeah, this is the immediate proximity of our Milky Way galaxy in the larger universe, and the idea is that we will civilize all that through AGI, and this is being published by Oxford University scientists. But let's get back to this here for now. So what I want you to take away is that in transhumanism and these other ideologies I just mentioned, such as singularitarianism or cosmism, the idea that we will spread into the Virgo supercluster is called cosmism. This idea is deeply connected with this vision that, or this idea, or this understanding that AI is an evolutionary force. Yeah, AI innovation is a natural force. You cannot stop it. You can only make use of it. And this natural force, such as gravity, for instance, or natural selection in Darwinian evolution theory, this natural force, which is called AI, technological innovation, will lead the human species to a new level of their existence. That is the idea. And such a process, where you can already imagine that this goes by like improving intelligence, and in this evolutionary process, humanity will get more intelligent and less mortal, and so on. This is a process that will not go without selections, which is why eugenics is back in the form of these ideologies that are present in the AI communities and have been for decades. Eugenics, I don't know, maybe you don't even know what that is because it might be long forgotten, and it better should be, but it is this pseudoscience that was driving the Nazis but before the Nazis, the people in the UK and in the US, this pseudoscience of the selection of people in procreation by their genes. Yeah, this idea that you should kind of amplify evolution or even augment society by not allowing everybody to procreate in the same way, but to allow only people with good genes to have children. Eugenics, the syllable "eu" is good in Greek, and eugenics comes from this gene thing. So good genes. Yeah, eugenics, the pseudoscience of the good genes. So this has been an ideology, a pseudoscience, a scientific discipline that has been used as a justification for very restrictive programs in the past in Germany and worldwide in the Western world. For instance, the prevention of marriage would be a restrictive measure which is comparatively harmless to prosecution, forced sterilization, incarceration, and murder, based on the idea that you do not have good genes. You usually distinguish between restrictive and selective eugenics. This is the restrictive strategies of eugenics, while there are also selective strategies of eugenics, which mean that we will not murder or incarcerate people with allegedly bad genes, but we will stimulate people with allegedly good genes to procreate more. Yeah, that would be the kind of the selective strategy. For instance, selective breeding or incentives to certain demographics or certain people to get children. This has been politics for quite some decades in the 20th century, and it will be back in the next. Eugenics is resurfacing today. For instance, maybe even trivially, but in the use of AI to predict healthcare outcomes or criminal justice. We had it here, the idea of predicting criminal recidivism. It is also heavily used, for instance, in the insurance industry to decide whether you are worthwhile to receive a certain therapy. This might be soft measures compared to what is still on the list. There is a huge fetishization of IQ nowadays in the AI community for sure, but even in wider society, and it has also become mainstream in the alt-right politics. I will look at the fetishization of IQ on the next slide. So I go over it here on this slide. There is this fetish with superintelligence, and this is how the idea of an intelligence explosion connects to eugenics, because the story goes like this. There is no AGI yet. Even brainwashed tech ideologists would admit that there is no AGI yet, but it will be very soon. And in order to get there, we need, first of all, very intelligent humans. So we need mechanisms that select humans by intelligence and maybe even make them more intelligent, because then we will be able to develop AGI, an AGI that will then start self-improving in this recursive self-improvement loop, so that then we can trigger the intelligence explosion as a path to superintelligence. This is how this connects to eugenics. Another aspect through which eugenics is resurfacing today in the tech bro culture is selective natalism. For instance, Elon Musk is a big proponent of selective natalism. So natalism is the idea that, or the stance, the belief. Isn't there a separate slide on that? Maybe, I don't know. Let's look. Let's see what happens. Natalism is the stance that we should have more kids. And not only for individual satisfaction, like in the sense of, it makes you happy if you have kids. No, but for the population. This is natalism or pronatalism. Yeah, it's synonyms, pronatalism and natalism. And then there is this subvariant called selective pronatalism, which is the stronger ideology that says that only certain people should have more kids. And there you see this selection idea from eugenics in it. And Elon Musk, for instance, I mean, he is a father of at least 14 kids, with most of them he fathered using in vitro fertilization. So where you fertilize the egg in vitro and then only afterwards place them in uterus. And he allegedly also used genetic screening of these embryos, selecting even for polygenetic traits, which means things such as intelligence or a lower likelihood to develop certain psychological diseases, even gender. In Elon Musk, it is only allegations by some of its kids and ex-partners who made these allegations. He never confirmed, although he is heavily tweeting positively about or affirmatively about pronatalism. Yeah, there are many tweets of him showing that he is in favor and very much obsessed indeed with pronatalism and birth rate and reproduction. There are even others in the US, for instance, the Collins family, I have a slide on them, who are much more vocal in this. I will get back to this in that slide. Yeah, and also, I mean, Elon Musk, he is not only invested in companies that produce artificial uteri, yeah, so that you don't need the women anymore for the reproduction because you have an artificial uterus. I mean, he's a very misogynist person anyway. But he's also invested in companies like SpaceX or Neuralink, which all makes sense when you think of transhumanism and this idea that we will once leave the Earth and settle in the space. And of course, this will also be a point where there will be selection involved. Yeah, who will Elon Musk take to Mars when the Earth is burning because of climate catastrophe? Who will it be that he's going to take to Mars? It will certainly not be women above the reproductive age. It will most certainly not be people who are non-white. It will most certainly be people that will be kind of genetically tested for you don't know what all, and so on. So this is how eugenics is being relevant again. I want to look a little bit closer at this fetishization or obsession with IQ, because this is really important, also if you work at a cognitive science institute. And I decided to include a brief history of IQ here in the lecture. You already see the dudes, and let's look at the history. That notion of the intelligence quotient, like the idea to measure intelligence, is not at all a natural idea, isn't it? Like giving a number to it, to something like intelligence, is really something that takes a lot of scientific positivism, behavioral psychology, and probably economic thinking or whatever to come up with. The idea was invented by Alfred Binet in France, and he explicitly even warned against the danger of, for instance, interpreting IQ or intelligence as an innate or like invariant thing about a human being. Yeah, so he was well aware that the number that he started assigning to people could change over lifetime, but even from situation to situation, depending also on what you ask people and so on. So he was developing it actually as a criterion to figure out which pupils at school needed special kind of attention in terms of helping them to master what they are to learn. This idea, however, was briefly taken up in the US, for instance, by these two guys. First of all, Louis Terman, who he was first, and in 1916, he kind of tweaked this Binet test to a new test, a numeric test called the Stanford Binet IQ test. And Henry Goddard was then taking this and institutionalized it. And that is made it a part of the repertoire of tools used by several state and educational institutions in the US. both of these guys were strong proponents of eugenics, of this pseudoscience of eugenics, that you should select by genetic traits. They promoted, for instance, the use of the IQ test to sort individuals by intelligence and restrict reproduction and access to education, especially access to higher education. And this institutionalization of the IQ test as a eugenic measure or a political measure in the US went further through the 1920s. For instance, the Immigration Act of 1924 implemented immigration restrictions based on IQ, or forced sterilization programs were established in the US in the later 20s. This here is a reference to a court case which was lost by the person who underwent a forced sterilization because that person was not intelligent enough. And it is important to keep in mind that this is not only a matter of the past. The notion of IQ has, especially in the alt-right movement of the last years, become a dog whistle for racist slurs. For instance, when you observe, and now trigger warning and an excuse right ahead, I will now reproduce some of the racist cliches to make it clear to you what I mean. For instance, Donald Trump, when in TV debates he was asked about Kamala Harris, he would state something like that she is just a very low IQ individual. And this is, for the alt-right people, this is directly translates into racism, yeah? Into a racist slur, because the IQ concept is a racially heavily biased concept and has always been, and this is well known. And selecting by IQ, however, is not so much under contestation or pressure in the US as it would have been if he answered with a racist slur outright. Yeah, this is how referencing IQ, especially calling somebody low IQ, is kind of a dog whistle. Yeah, like it creates the association. Like the people, the audience, the alt-right audience knows very well what is meant, and what is meant is here a racist slur. This guy also has a huge IQ obsession and has been having it for 20 years at least. Peter Thiel famously makes categories, like hierarchical categories of individuals. In this case here, founders versus normal people. Founders are the people with a higher IQ. There will be another slide on that later. The important thing is that the idea is that these are natural hierarchies. Yeah, the people with the higher IQ are naturally in a position of entitlement and privilege because they have the higher IQ. Here is the slide on selective natalism. So it's the belief that wealthy and privileged people in industrialized society should have more offspring, and that they should use in vitro fertilization and genetic screening to select good traits in their embryos. Yeah, these are two separate statements that build on each other. The one is that we need more offspring, which also could mean that you should have more kids. And the other thing is that among the kids you improve the genes. Yeah, these are the two selective aspects in here. And Elon Musk is a vocal proponent of pronatalism. He is obsessed with population collapse. He lost his first child to sudden infant death syndrome, and since then has been starting to use in vitro fertilization, at least with the succeeding, like with the immediately succeeding 3 kids. So there might actually be biographical trauma that explains some of the behavior of this guy, but this is only speculation, of course. A famous and very vocal proponents of pronatalism are the Collins family. The Collins family, Malcolm and Simone Collins, they are the founders of pronatalist.org, and all of the Collins children have been conceived via in vitro fertilization with embryos selected based on genetic markers for intelligence and health. This is the Collins family. I took the liberty of screenshotting this section from their pronatalist.org website. Simone and Malcolm Collins have operated companies on 5 continents that collectively pulled in $70 million annually, raised a PE fund-directed strategy at top early-stage venture capital firms. They have written 5 best-selling books, served as managing director of one of the world's most exclusive secret societies, and earned degrees in neuroscience, business, and technology policy from St. Andrews, Stanford, and Cambridge. Currently, they are building a new education system designed to increase the quality and decrease the cost of gifted education. Wow, they must be super intelligent. And of course, they only want super intelligent kids, which is why they select the best of their genes to give them further, pass them on to their kids. Let's get to the stage 2. That was only stage 1. Stage 2 is a little bit separate, as a kind of a separate development, but a little bit younger than transhumanism. And this is also feeds into what we are now seeing today in terms of tech ideologies. I don't know who of you might know the rationalists and Less Wrong, this internet forum founded by Elisée Yudkowsky. So the rationalists are a loosely affiliated online community focused on refining human reasoning and decision making. Yeah, they kind of found themselves around an internet blog that was called lesswrong.com, founded in the late 2000s by this self-taught AI engineer, AI engineer without formal education, Elisée Yudkowsky. And they were kind of, it's a bunch of guys heavily obsessed with Bayesian statistics. Bayesian statistics, I will kind of introduce some of the cores of Bayesian statistics to you in the next lecture, because that will be important when we talk about the AI state. You can also jump over the row. No problem. So Bayesian statistics, I mean, Bayes is an old guy from the 17th century, but he was rediscovered as part of this whole AI movement for reasons I will explain to you next week. But the Less Wrong movement was of the opinion that one could improve or self-improve cognitively, your own cognitive skills, by, for instance, using the Bayesian theorem in any situation in your life, and, for instance, getting rid of irrationality, emotions, and becoming fully rational and doing rational decision-making in all areas of your life. And this community applied this form of rational thinking to all areas of life, although they developed a heavy obsession with existential risk issues in the context of AI. So they, at some point in the 2010s, they converged actually to fewer issues, and they were related to the risk of extinction by AI. The important thing is that while transhumanism was dealing a lot, like the 20th century, mid-20th century transhumanism was dealing a lot with future outlooks. Yeah, AI will help us transcend our biological limits, but they didn't have a formal methodology, let alone a mathematical methodology of formalizing these scenarios, these future scenarios, for instance, to deal with the probability that they might really occur and so on. And the Bayesian statistics kind of cultivated by the rationalists that helped transhumanism to put these future things on a less speculative basis and on a more mathematical basis. I know that this might be unclear now, but I will try to explain that to you separately and with a little bit more time next week. The rationalists, I went through that here. From them, we got terms that are still out there, yeah? Terms like friendly AI, paperclip maximizer, AI alignment. That's terms that are still being used. Paperclip maximizer, you know what that is? It's this idea, this kind of thought experiment that if you program an AI, possibly a super intelligent AI, to maximize the production of paperclips on Earth, then it might be rational from the point of view of that AI system to kill human beings, to use their resources to build more paperclips. So this is kind of a warning thought experiment to show you that you should kind of implement the right utility functions and take care of alignment, value alignment, in those AI systems. Yeah, it's kind of a funny thought experiment in this existential risk discourse. I want to mention another dominant branch of ideologies that are very deeply ingrained in the AI community over the past 30 years. It's technological determinism. This is maybe even so obvious that it doesn't deserve a slide, but I decided that it does deserve a slide. It's the idea that technological development drives historical change and shapes social structures, values, and outcomes, often in a linear or inevitable way. This is not the claim that AI innovation is an evolutionary force. Yeah, we are not. Technological determinism doesn't make an evolutionary claim. It makes a societal claim. Yeah, it makes a claim that the wealth, the level of wealth at which we are living is basically a direct function of the level of technology that we have, and that technological innovation will lead to improvement of life quality, that the social structures are directly a function of technology. For instance, dating apps will change how we mate. And if you are a technological determinist, then you would say dating apps determine how we mate. There will not be any kind of, for instance, cultural or psychological or individual decisions shaping this, but it will be largely determined by technology. Sounds one-sided. It is also one-sided, but it's still what many people believe. I think I said that. And one way this surfaces now, or one form this gets apparent, is what you call, or where this entangles with capitalism. That may be the better intro. So one way technological determinism, which is a philosophical kind of stance, gets relevant capitalistically or economically, is techno-optimism. There is this guy here, Mark Andreessen. He's the co-founder of a big venture capitalist fund in Silicon Valley, and he wrote this viral techno-optimist manifesto. If you want to have some fun bedtime reading, Google for the techno. No, don't use Google. Whatever, get the techno-optimist manifesto and read it. It is a pamphlet, like a very radical, alt-right, like right-wing radical libertarian document outlining the belief that technological progress will inevitably lead to improved human well-being, and it will solve everything, and it will drive society to the better. And I mean, this is boring so far, but the thing is that this will be despite issues such as the climate change. Yeah, he would explicitly say that we should use more energy and not less, because technological innovation, which will be only possible when we use more energy, will then solve the issue of the climate change. For instance, technological innovation will also solve the issue of poverty, poverty that is currently being created by AI capitalism. Not sure how he envisions that to be solved, but he does. Technological innovation is also hindered by democracy and regulation. So it is a manifesto that also has these anti-democratic ressentiments that regulation of technology is something that will slow down this process and is therefore detrimental to society. I think this immediately translates to detrimental for venture capitalists, but maybe society only consists of venture capitalists and entrepreneurs in the worldview of such people. So it's this unconditional growth imperative, and there are even quotes here. He says, we need to grow. It's a very interesting justification of the growth ideology. We need to grow because societies are like sharks. Either they grow or they die. So it plays with this risk of extinction once again, and from this argues that we need to embrace growth. And our desire, I said that. Techno-optimism is the moral endorsement of an unfettered libertarianism, given from Silicon Valley dudes to Silicon Valley dudes. Libertarianism, this idea that we should not at all regulate, and that everybody in terms of business can do what they want as long as they don't kill people. This is libertarianism, and apparently libertarianism creates huge issues such as social injustice, an increasing gap between rich and poor people, resource exploitation. These are all the unsolved problems of libertarianism, which is why we have regulation and not libertarianism, but more liberalism or liberal democracies, and these are the enemies to these people. Another important ideology that you should be aware of when you listen to this lecture is techno-solutionism. Techno-solutionism is the belief that complex social, political, and moral problems can and should be solved primarily through technological solutions. This aligns very directly to this technological determinism. It kind of, while technological determinism is a metaphysical claim or a claim in the philosophy of technology, that ontologically speaking, technology will drive societal structures, change, and so on. Technological solutionism is now the kind of ethical or political program associated with this belief. It is a normative stance. It says we should use technology to solve our social issues. For instance, I give the examples in a second. Important, technological solutionism is one of the few ideologies I present you today where the proponents of the ideologies do not use that term. This is actually a term, an ascription, a critical term. If I say that your suggestion sounds very techno-solutionist, then I criticize your suggestion for being techno-solutionist, while techno-solutionism is not a label that these people would use themselves, unlike all the other labels I presented so far. For instance, one can find the idea that we could use here AI to solve crime, or to fix bureaucracy, or to solve the lack of teachers at school. There is so many people calling for AI in all these kind of social and welfare areas, such as elderly care or nurses in hospitals. You find all these suggestions where we could use technological solutions for problems that were actually created by bad or like defunding of certain welfare, social welfare domains. For instance, why don't you pay nurses more? Then there will also be more nurses. Why don't you train more teachers? Or maybe improve the renommee of the teaching job? Then there might be more teachers. Now instead we invest in AI. And at the same time we have unemployment. And this is often sold as by reducing socio-political problems, for instance, the lack of teachers, to a technological problem, things get easier, because you don't have to think, why are we in this situation? Maybe what is the social status of teachers? Is it fun dealing with kids or not? How can we improve on that? How can we train these people, the teachers, better? What does it need in terms of education? All this you don't have to think about. You kind of hand over the problem to engineers, to programming people, and then they program something. Yeah, this makes problems more linear, less debatable, less contestable. It just gives solutions, and this is why it's called solutionism. Yeah, and this creates this kind of a technocratic society, and demobilizes any form of value debates, like what actually should a teacher be like to be a good teacher, or a person working in elderly care, what does it mean to do that to do that job well, and so on. Yeah, these are the kind of, this was now a collection of labels or beliefs that are often mentioned. Let's now get one stage further and look at how they radicalize. And now we will be kind of climbing a ladder of radicalization. The next step is that these beliefs, which are mostly so far metaphysical worldviews, I mentioned the term ethics once already, I know, but like at large, what I mentioned so far are more metaphysical orientations in the world. And what you can see is that in the last 20 years, they also have been developing ethics. So they have heavily turned into normative programs, yeah, prescribing what you should believe or what you should do, how you should act, and so on, and not only making statements, if you will, ideological statements about the world. And one big strand that we should mention here is long-termism. It's the ethical view that the long-term future of humanity is of enormous moral importance, and that improving it should be a key priority today. Finally, somebody taking care of climate change. Nice. The assumptions in this movement, however, and it is a very strong and heavily funded movement, it's not like a couple of guys sitting somewhere at some unimportant positions, but it's people funded by millions of dollars. They assume that there will be a vast future with trillions of lives and more, and by that they mean super intelligently augmented life forms. Yeah, they are not talking about you and me. They are talking in this transhumanist mindset about AGI improved life forms that will be post-biological and so on. And what they are talking about is the ultra-far future. By that they mean the future in millions of years. They are not talking about climate change. They are not talking about what happens to your kids or yourselves and the kids of your kids. They are talking about the 10 to the 38 humans that will be there in the Virgo supercluster at some point in the future. And here comes the slide that I mentioned already earlier. This is actually an argument taken from an early paper from Nick Bostrom, a guy that we met him already before in transhumanism. And the philosophical argument goes somewhat like this, like I tried to summarize it in 3 steps, although it is a paper. By means of superintelligence, humanity will colonize space. That's the first assumption. Yeah, we will spread into space with almost the speed of light, because it cannot be faster, you know. So let's assume we will reach almost like we can spread into space by almost the speed of light, and then in some billion years, 10 to the 38 digital humans will live in the Virgo supercluster. How does he come up with that number? and how many years? The thing is, the calculation goes like this. He calculated how much energy, like in relativity theory, energy and mass are kind of related through a formula. And so if you know the mass, the sum total of the masses of all the stars and galaxy in the Virgo supercluster, you can calculate the energy. And then you divide that sum total of energy that's available in the Virgo supercluster by the energy it takes, the computational energy it takes for one human lifespan. So you basically calculate how many computations does a brain do in 100 years, and that you translate into some energy costs for computation. You are very optimistic. You calculate it with quantum computers because they are much more cost efficient. And then you know how much energy you need for one human life. And then you can take the sum total of energy in the Virgo supercluster and divide it by the energy you need for one human life. And then you end up with 10 to the 38 human lives running on that supercomputer that will be established. He is an Oxford University philosophy professor. And then comes the argument that sparks the idea of long-termism, maybe one of the arguments, yeah? It's just one sample argument that's being used. What happens if we delay that development of a super intelligence that will eventually make us spread into the cosmos? If we delay it by a certain time, then it will cost lives in that future, in that vast future. And so delaying the development of that superintelligence by 100 years today will prevent 10 to the 29 happy human lives in that very future. Yeah, because we get into that later, and then there are like one generation less of these humans.
Do long-termists ever discuss much about the relative costs of unborn lives versus, or future-born lives versus current lives or near future-born lives? Because yes, that is 100 lives. Or 100 years. That's a lot of less lives. Those are lives that have not been born. So there's no pain in that loss of life, for they have never existed.
Yes, true, thanks. This is one of the objections to such calculations, and it is generally a problem in long-termism that they have this population utilitarianism, yeah, that you look at the total population and its size as a value in itself, which is philosophically contested, but still in this very mighty collective or movement of long-termism, it is still an argument that people make use of. And I think it is, like with all ideologies, it is a good idea to approach such ideologies not necessarily by the question of why do they think this is true, in terms of I have a counter-argument, they must have debated this. Maybe I don't understand, but the why question is more in the sense of who benefits from believing in this. Yeah, where does the money go? This is usually a good approach when debunking ideologies.
Regarding that point, don't they at all calculate with the risk of if climate change or something goes very wrong, humanity dies out entirely? Doesn't that then prevent like 10 to the 38? So isn't that something that should be, if you take this long-termism seriously, shouldn't that also be calculated in?
Yes, thank you. This is something that they are obsessed with, I would say, as far as I know. And this is why some of them say, yeah, this is why we should do this fast. Yeah, we should develop AGI soon, for instance, before the Earth collapses. Or it also suffices, like we don't need the whole population on Earth to develop AGI. You see where this leads to. The majority will suffer from climate change, and some will set off to Mars or upload their consciousness or their precious intelligence into the cloud or to the Virgo supercluster. Yeah, this is also an exit strategy from the catastrophe on Earth. These people are not, especially they are not denying climate change, but they just say it is comparatively less important. And this is and this is why I want to tell it to you. This is really the next level. Okay, I'm 40-something now, and in my youth, we have already been fighting against climate change. But we have been fighting against the people denying climate change. Nowadays, you will have to fight against the people knowing very well, but not giving a shit. And coming up with good reasons, good in question marks, reasons why they don't give a shit. And why they have a technological solution, why we don't have to be afraid of it. And the we usually means a few, while the majority will suffer. Yeah, controversy, the neglect of present-day injustice or inequality. It's not only climate change, but evidently nowadays, like 4 years ago in this lecture, I couldn't say evidently, but 4 years ago in this lecture, I didn't even have this whole session today. Evidently, the AI industry produces a lot of suffering and injustice on Earth, exploitation of labor, of data, of energy, of resources. Like monetary inequalities, big monopolies, influence on politics, fascization of politics, disruption of democracies. These are all the societal effects of the AI industry that are very detrimental and you could call them risky to society. But this long-termism, which is maybe the dominant voice in AI ethics, maybe outside of academic circles or lecture halls, they say, no, there is a much, much bigger ethical risk, and this is the extinction risk. And this is why we should all focus all our energies on that superintelligence will be quickly developed, because otherwise China will do it, and then it will be harmful to us. And we must align superintelligence, the alignment problem, which means that we should develop superintelligence in such a way that it doesn't, that it aligns with our values. And by that we can ignore in the relative importance the climate change, societal injustice nowadays. It might be even justified if it speeds up AI development. Yeah.
Just look at Longtermism. Couldn't one look at the basic premise and derive completely different conclusions? Like we have to preserve this direct 738 people. Should we then not take extra care not to develop our AI too fast before it will maybe destroy us? Can you derive that?
I would agree with you. I don't know how they answer. It's important to me that the sample argument I picked is one sample argument. When you read long-termist text, you find different ways of arguing for this. Yeah, not everybody believes in this cosmism. They have then other arguments. It's really interesting to look at how these arguments work. There is also, maybe this also relates to your question, 1 second. There is this issue of overconfidence. How can you predict what happens in 1 trillion years if you cannot even predict the weather of tomorrow? Seriously, and not even using AI. Not with the best AI system, you can reliably predict whether it rains tomorrow in Osnabrück you can, but in normal cities with normal precipitation. And they have this kind of overconfidence in the ultra long-term predictions, where it needs like a chaotic perturbation in the now that might completely alter the outcome in 1 trillion years. You were raising your hand?
Yeah, I wanted to ask, you said before that people think that AI will resolve a lot of problems because it knows stuff we don't. And now you said they want to align their ideology with the AI. So the AI with their ideology doesn't like contradict itself. Just like it's when their ideology isn't the thing that AI will.
Thank you. No, this was unclear then. By alignment, they mean that you must take care that the AI system observes certain ethical or moral values. For instance, that it doesn't kill people. But there is not a list of 10 laws that will then be conclusive in terms of the values that govern human society. There will be more, and there will be complex kind of decisions, sub-corner case and so on. And this is the alignment problem, that it is hard to come up with a extensive codification of moral laws that once it is formulated and then you feed it to the AI system, if it observes these rules, then it will be kind of non-harmful. This is not a problem that you can easily solve. Yeah, of course, it is very elite-driven and technocratic decision-making, it rests heavily on this population ethics that relating to your question, like this total population as a value, population size as a utility function in utilitarianism and so on, which is a heavily debatable assumption. But, and this is why I bring this here under the headline of an ideology. Yeah, what is an ideology? An ideology is always a belief system that makes you not see certain things. Yeah, that kind of obfuscates certain important societal issues and serves the interest of others. That is when you call a thing like a belief system an ideology. Yeah, you would say that it hiddenly, yeah, without the people necessarily noticing. By engaging in this belief system, they serve certain interests and obfuscate others' interests. And in this case, it is quite clear that long-termism implicitly legitimizes social injustice, resource consumption, exploitation, which are the contemporary effects of the AI industry, for the sake of some alleged long-term goal or Heilsversprechen in the very far future. There are people going as far as saying that this is actually a very secular form of Christian beliefs. Yeah, there is this kind of immortality, the resurrection in the long-term future, that what drives these ideologies, like the force that makes people really engage in it and believe it, is kind of similar to what makes people attached to Christian ideology. Yeah, there's actually maybe this could be the background reading for next week. There's a nice paper on that. These are ideologies in the tech communities, but again, like I had a similar point earlier in the first section, again here, there is also a mainstream version of that. Yeah, so even this long-termism is well established in the mainstream, and in the mainstream it goes under the term of existential risks. Existential risk is the framing that the future with AI, yeah, the societal future as it is shaped by AI, has only two versions. Either it will be absolute paradise on earth, we will not have to work, we will not get sick, and we will not die, and everybody will be so happy. That is the utopia, and the other option is the apocalypse, where some hostile AGI system will extinguish us, and we will all die, or we will be enslaved, and so on. And there is little room for kind of shades of gray in between these two very extreme options, and this is again an ideological effect. Yeah, this is it's not a bug, it's a feature that there is no room for alternatives, because the ideological function of this belief in existential risks is that we should not debate the implications of AI in the present, and not come up with responsible regulation of the industry to mitigate the impact that is already evident today, instead of looking only at the ultra long-term future. And by ultra long-term, I want to say that clearly again, I mean 10 to the 6 or 10 to the 9 years in the future. I do not mean the time span that is relevant, for instance, to climate change. Yeah, they should better look at the near future, like in terms of 100 years, 300 years, 500 years, but not maybe be so heavily speculative about the ultra long-term future. Long-termism is heavily funded from Silicon Valley, from philanthropic organizations, and so on. You will see that in a second. Long-termism is even in the political mainstream. Yeah, we have political, for instance, the AI Safety Summit in Great Britain 2023, called by Rishi Sunak, was a summit on existential risk. Yeah, where politicians internationally convene to debate what we can do to prevent existential risks. In Cambridge, there are research centers on existential risks. This is really now some piece of lobby work also in politics to steer, because the message is we need to we need to heavily fund the AI industry so that we, the Western societies, will be first in attaining or reaching superintelligence, and not China, because China will be hostile. And second, we need to deregulate the AI industry, because if you regulate, you kind of hinder this natural force of AI, and then it will go elsewhere. This is how it is already very efficient in the mainstream. The breeding ground for long-termism, and this now turns the page to the next chapter, is effective altruism. This is the wider community movement behind long-termism, in which actually long-termism was started, if you will. Effective altruism, and I know that this might be delicate now, for reasons that you see in a couple of slides, but effective altruism is a social and intellectual movement that advocates using evidence and reason to do the most good, whatever that is, often by focusing on high-impact causes like global health, animal welfare, or long-term existential risk. Effective altruism is a kind of ethical, philosophical movement originating from some academic philosophers at the University of Oxford, maybe also kind of building on some Peter Singer work from the middle of the 20th century, but let's spare these details here, that originally started as philanthropic movements, so it's an academic movement combined with lots of money from philanthropic donors in Silicon Valley. Effective altruism is a movement that would say something like, we want to do good, like with our money, we are billionaires, we want to kind of give it to charities or to kind of help the poor, but we want to do it in an efficient way. And then these people started kind of methodologizing the question of how can we actually be most efficient in doing good. And that led to, for instance, some NGOs that they co-founded, for instance, rating charities by cost-benefit scores, like for how much money can they serve how many human lives, and then they would come up with ratings, or they would kind of demand measurable outcomes from charities, or they would found their own charities worldwide that would use methodologies such as cost-benefit analysis, Bayesian statistics, and mathematical modeling to kind of make ethical decisions. So it is basically, it's a form of people who want to do something with their money that is good, but who want to do this in the same logics as they would run a startup or a company. Yeah, they would kind of use risk modeling, cost-benefit analysis, like ethical dilemma, like should we better fund this person, or this country, or that person, that country. That would all be decided by mathematical modeling using numeric evidence and so on. How do you quantify a life? I don't know. But this is kind of, first it is an ethical movement that started kind of to blend with certain approaches in statistics, if you will say that. Core people in effective altruism are here. William MacAskill, society tends to neglect the future in favor of the present. Positive change is the result of long, hard work by thinkers and activists. We can be pivotal in steering the future onto a better trajectory. There is no better time for a movement to stand up not just for our generation or even our children's generation, but for all the generations yet to come. You already see how this might tilt into long-termism. Yeah, as I said, effective altruism is the breeding ground for long-termism. Long-termism is a radicalization of effective altruism, and now I kind of want to zoom out and tell you that where this all started, and where this all started is in effective altruism. William MacAskill is one of the key figureheads of this movement, co-founder and advisor to tech figures influential in spreading effective altruism. From Oxford, he is affiliated with in Oxford University. From Oxford to Silicon Valley. And Toby Ord is also a philosopher. He is he is much more connected to the long-termist subgroup of effective altruism and the existential risk debate. Other famous figure of the effective altruism movement are this here. Dustin, the head does not match the name, sorry, the name will match the head later. So Dustin Moskovitz, Facebook co-founder, and founder or co-founder of Open Philanthropy, like this big, what is it, NGO, heavily funded interest organization of Silicon Valley billionaires. Sam Bankman-Fried, the guy here, former crypto billionaire, now imprisoned because of a massive fraud scheme at his cryptocurrency exchange FTX. He was even running his own philanthropic effective altruism organization, which then went bankrupt together with his whole kind of chain of businesses as a result of the fraud. But also Holden Karnofsky, for instance, he is a co-founder. He was an investment banker before he went to co-found GiveWell and Open Philanthropy and so on. He was very he was introducing this methodology, also this kind of ranking of charities methodology. Effective altruism is massive. You will see it on the next slide in terms of the institutions that are aligned with effective altruism worldwide, in terms of the money that they get and distribute worldwide. And if you will, you can say that this is the ethical fig leaf of Silicon Valley ideology. Yeah, this is if Silicon Valley ideology is we should optimize everything using Bayesian statistics and mathematics, and we should do economics in the way that we take risks, found startups, and then we let them fail, and we should move fast and break things. If this is Silicon Valley ideology, then the ethical branch of that is effective altruism. Yeah? It is applying all these ideologies that I just mentioned to ethical decision making when it comes to doing good in the world. Selecting charities, running charities, selecting where you donate your money, selecting your career to optimize it for doing the most good in the world, and at the same time serving the tech industry. Effective altruism has a huge network. I already alluded to that, of NGOs or philanthropic organizations, but also academic organizations. The University of Oxford, outside of the Silicon Valley, the University of Oxford is a big hub, but also it is kind of, effective altruism was very influential in, or very successful in aligning companies. Like they try to address executives in companies to make them align with these interests here. They have also been running their own scholarship programs or institutes. Some of the logos you find here. Here there's even effective thesis. It's an organization helping students to select master thesis topics that are doing the most good in the world. It's a worldwide network of local organizations and think tanks, active also at universities and active in political lobby work. Yeah, also at universities, also in Germany, there's Effektiver Altruismus Deutschland. Yeah, the Effective Altruism also has a German group. You see here directly on their website, they advertise long-termism. This is really a sub-branch of Effective Altruism and intimately entangled, which you can already see here. Effective Altruism is trying to do their lobby work not only in Brussels when influencing AI regulation. For instance, Effective Altruism has reserved many domains, such as, for instance, artificialintelligenceact.com, .org. Yeah, they kind of they try to shape the public opinion about AI regulation, which will be leaning towards less regulation then. They lobbied in Brussels, for instance, in relation to the AI Act, but they are also active in recruiting their disciples at universities and others. For instance, here from the strategy paper of Effective Altruism Germany to 2025, you find this document here. We will focus on testing our impact on a new target group that other organizations struggle to reach, and that seems especially promising: scholarship holders of Begabtenförderungswerke, organizations supporting gifted students. In Germany, we have a network that could enable us to do this successfully. Yeah, I don't know who of you are in Studienstiftung or other of the politically affiliated Stiftungen here, but the Effective Altruism is heavily trying to kind of hijack these organizations by offering, for instance, weekend seminars and other things that will then typically be heavily funded from the Effective Altruism network, because they also have this obsession with IQ. Yeah? Effective Altruism also has this department where they would score students, for instance, by their potential to become a good Effective Altruism disciple. Yeah, not only IQ, but also like ideological affiliation with this ideology will be part of this. So that because they, for instance, also would give out scholarships. There might even people here in the room who receive a $20,000 a year scholarship from Effective Altruism, because they have this program that they would, if they identify you as a high potential individual student in line with this ideology, there would be scholarships for you that you can get to to study, and they would score you along such parameters. Effective Altruism is actually present in at least 4 German university cities: Aachen, Berlin, Mannheim, and Osnabrück. Yeah, Effective Altruism also has a subgroup in Osnabrück, a student group, for instance here. It's not advertisement, it's anti-advertisement. Already this week you can attend a seminar by them. I really want to be clear. Effective Altruism is the gateway drug into the tech ideologies that are currently radicalizing as anti-democratic forces. I know that not all people affiliated and engaging in effective altruisms would follow this line of radicalization because many of them really want to do good. But this is still the entry stage into what I presented to you here. And I wish that at least as they are trying to catch some, to have some influence also here in Osnabrück, and they would even use kind of like the AStA money and the facilities of the student center to host their workshops. I at least want you to know that this is affiliated with what's currently going on in the world. And this is what we can now have a look at in the last 15 minutes. Damn, I will not fully finish it in 15 minutes, but we will start. I had this 3-stage radicalization process, and you remember that the 3rd stage was this ethical turn, yeah? That it's not only on metaphysical worldviews, but they really turn it into a program, a normative program, what you should do, how you should behave, what careers you should take, how you should not regulate AI, and so on. And over the last few years, you can, or maybe if you look very closely, maybe over the last 15 years, you can observe that they even radicalize politically. And that means that they do not only formulate ethical programs, but you now find ideological branches where they would formulate explicit political visions, and they are anti-democratic. For instance, one movement that should be mentioned here, and this is potentially the most radical, it's called Neoreaction, or Dark Enlightenment, a reactionary anti-democratic ideology advocating for hierarchical technocratic governance, rejecting liberal democracy in favor of a monarchy, corporate rule or CEO-style state. The two main figures in this movement, which again started on internet blogs, is this Curtis Yarvin, who praises himself as an unemployed but gifted computer scientist, ja, arbeitsloser, aber hochbegabter Informatiker. He is published in the ultra-right Antaios Verlag, from Kubitschek, like this ultra-rechter AfD-nah publishing company in the German translations. And Nick Land, a British philosopher at the University of Warwick, who took Curtis Yarvin's conspiracy theoretical blog post. Like Curtis Yarvin has a blog, yeah, and on that blog he writes fully crazy and very conspiracy theoretical kind of bullshit. And this Nick Land was kind of taking this up and making philosophy out of it, and also calling it Dark Enlightenment, because yeah, it comes across as an Enlightenment philosophy, and a philosophy that brings you a truth, but a truth that is not a nice one, but an unbequeme Wahrheit. This is why they call themselves Dark Enlightenment. Core principles are: democracy is flawed and inefficient because it hinders technological development as an evolutionary force. Yeah, as I said, if you try to regulate, if you try to uphold equality of all people, equality of chances, maybe you want to redistribute to level out welfare standards and so on, all this is interpreted by these people as something that goes against this evolutionary force of technological innovation and against allegedly natural hierarchies. Yeah? They believe in natural hierarchies of intelligence, of race, of gender. They are eugenicists through and through, but also racists. And technology should serve elites who can wield it rationally. One of the ideologies that these two people come up with, and unfortunately it's not limited to these two people, it is heavily being taken up, for instance in the White House, is this idea of the CEO state. This is why it's called Neoreaction. They really want to go back to a monarchy. Yeah, they want to they want to smash democracy in favor of some form of monarchy. That monarchy is often called CEO state or government corporation model. The idea is that a state should be run like a startup, or maybe like a company. So everybody who now has money or political influence will be shareholders. And these shareholders, they elect a board, and the board elects a CEO. And the population, so all of us, minus those who have money and influence, the general population is only customers. Yeah, they are modeled in this model of the government corporation as customers. And these customers pay tax and receive some, like an apartment to live, and they have to work. And this is here. And then there is basically only one, like there is no democratic part, there is no democracy, so there is no political participation. The principle is no voice-free exit. That you can read this extensively in Nick Land's philosophy. No voice-free exit means no political participation, no democratic voice like voting, speaking up, making a claim, but free exit. And to quote the founder of the seasteading movement, like this model, the government corporation model, it's being experimented with in the seasteading movement, yeah, where people buy land from poor people to build an independent state, or where they would build an artificial island somewhere on the international waters, where they could found a state that runs by these laws. This is trying, like there are experiments with this, and the founder of the seasteading development or movement famously said that there is only one human right, and this is the right of free exit. So the idea, they really honestly have the idea that there should be only one human right, and this is that you can leave when you don't like your CEO state. So for instance, if it's too exploitive, if taxes are too high and your work is too hard and your apartment too shitty, you can leave. This is the only claim that you have. You can leave for another CEO state. Just leave for another state. And imagine, I mean, this is an ultra right-wing ideology, so adopted by people who are so anti-migration. So there you see the cynicism in this, yeah? And they, of course, they're also migrants. They would model by this law. So they come from shitty states, and now they want to be part of our state, which is a better state. No. This is how this kind of very deeply cynical ideology works. Yeah, it's not only these two lost individuals blogging somewhere, but for instance, it's also this guy, Peter Thiel, certainly one of the most long-time right-wing proponents in Silicon Valley. Peter Thiel, he was upholding anti-democratic ideas already 20 years ago. Co-founder of Palantir, PayPal, Founders Fund, first outside investor in Facebook. Peter Thiel is now, by the way, also the co-author of books such as The Diversity Myth, where he was going against multiculturalism in higher education in the United States, and that is already from 1995, so it's 30 years ago. Also going against affirmative action in anti-discrimination politics in the US. He famously and very often is being quoted by this sentence that he said in an essay in 2009, "I no longer believe that freedom and democracy are compatible." That has been heavily taken up by Nick Land, so the neo-reactionary philosopher, to give rise to this ideas of neo-reactionary, like to this anti-democracy idea, blaming welfare states and women's rights movements for the political decay, for the alleged political decay of Western societies. He wants to turn to cyberspace and space colonization and seasteading to create a new space for freedom, by which he means such monarchic CEO-style monarchies as places of two freedoms for the rich. Yeah, and he also he is really he is not a liberal, yeah? This is why I also put this quotation here from 2014. He says competition, so like market competition is for losers. He advises that companies should rather try to establish monopolies to really kind of dominate. So he is this kind of a person who holds very monarchical, autocratic visions of politics, economics, social welfare state, and so on. Here I have a few nice further quotations from him, but I will not spend too much time on this here. So what we see in the last decade, tech ideologies, yeah, everything that I kind of went through today started radicalizing towards outspokenly anti-democratic political visions. That doesn't mean that everybody in the tech industry, or for instance everybody in transhumanism or effective altruism is anti-democratic, but these movements have developed the tendency or the inclinations to breed anti-democratic movements, which are now a large part or a growing part of these movements in general, and a large part of certain movements that are now in political power. Because what we see is a timeline that starts from these seemingly innocent philosophical worldviews and then goes through these recent year radicalization processes where they started formulating political visions, and now this merges with the alt-right. Yeah, these heavily politicized or radicalized tech ideologies in the form of Neoreaction and Dark Enlightenment, they fuse with the alt-right movement. People say that the Dark Enlightenment is kind of the theory section of the alt-right. And people such as J.D. Vance make regularly references to, for instance, Curtis Yarvin, this hochbegabter but unemployed computer scientist and Neoreaction guy. Peter Thiel is a close friend of Curtis Yarvin. Elon Musk is also influenced by these ideologies. So you see how this now ended up in the White House. And we are not free from this here in Europe. This is the cliffhanger for next week. Next week I will give a lecture on the AI state or on AI and the state, and I will try to spell out what all this means for the state, especially also in Europe. If you want to read what I just told you, there are two excellent references on this. The one is the paper by Timnit Gebru and Emil Torres, the TESCREAL bundle. TESCREAL is actually an acronym for Transhumanism, Effective Altruism, Singularitarianism, Cosmism, Rationalism, and so on, for all the ideologies I brought to you. And there's also this very, very good and worthwhile reading by David Golumbia, The Right-Wing Politics of Digital Technology, which has especially more on this kind of neo-reactionism and Dark Enlightenment in it in the last chapter. Highly recommended readings. Thank you and see you next time.